Hey guys, welcome back. It's Missy. Do you ever notice when you have to say no, or before you say no to something, or if you have to explain yourself or give an explanation, or you notice someone questions you, you may overly explain yourself and you're unsure why you start to overly explain yourself and you give too much detail? We're going to talk about that today to understand why you overly explain yourself and how to stop. So the urge to overly explain yourself kind of falls into two categories. One, there's overly explaining yourself, and there's oversharing. And we're not going to go too much into oversharing today. I just thought it would be something because it's something that's so common that can be like a branch of overly explaining yourself, but we're going to mainly focus on overly explaining yourself. And in the future, we'll go into more in depth about oversharing. So overly explain yourself is when you explain yourself to an excessive degree, where you use a lot of words and a lot of details, and you use this to gain some sort of approval, understanding, or acceptance. You're basically trying to force a point, and there's this desperation of like, please believe me in what I'm saying. I mean, accept what I'm saying. There is this desperation to be heard and understood. So it comes from a place of anxiety, and the action is to overly explain yourself. It's a little bit of a soothing gesture. Now, oversharing is revealing an inappropriate amount of information and detail about your personal life. So basically, you're sharing too personal of things and details too quickly, and you're not judging the audience you're telling it to. And these things both come from trauma. They are both trauma responses. So like I said, we're going to go more into detail about overly explaining yourself. So let's understand, where does overly explaining yourself, or the need to overly explain yourself, come from? So at some point in your childhood, or maybe when you were younger in your teenage years or your adulthood, but it does primarily usually start in childhood, you were made to feel at fault for things. And then that caused you to have a desire to people please, which was a coping mechanism, which it then provided some sort of safety. So like I had mentioned, overly explaining yourself is a trauma response, and it actually falls into the category of the fawn response. So we have the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and this is more of a fawn response. When we feel threatened and we feel we are in danger, one of those systems kick in order to survive and protect ourselves. So things have happened in your childhood, or maybe you had in your adult relationships, maybe you had a friendship, a romantic relationship. In this dynamic, the person would get angry at you, or they would fault you for things, or they would doubt you and your reality, or they would gaslight you. And that made you feel threatened and unsafe, especially if you're a child dealing with this, because you are helpless and you need your parents in order to survive. So if you feel helpless and threatened and your safety feels at risk, you're going to do what you feel is necessary to survive. So in that moment, you're like, oh no, I need to feel safe again. So when you go into that fawn response, you mainly go to, I need to try to keep them happy in order to keep them on my side, in order to keep them from abandoning me or from hurting me. So in order to keep them happy, if I overly explain myself and help them to understand me, then they will be satisfied. That's the thought process you most likely go through. So you have a need, and this is all very much subconscious, but you very much so have a need to feel understood in order to feel calm and relaxed. You need to feel validated and feel worthy, because you may replace a lot of your worth based on their feelings and how they respond to you, especially in childhood. So basically, in order to feel safe, you have formed this toxic ideology that you have to overly explain yourself in order to feel safe again, and to get out of some sort of danger. And then it becomes a pattern. It's something that you repeatedly do when you feel threatened and when you feel triggered. And the reason this fits into the category of the fawn response, because it's a form of people pleasing. When you overly explain yourself, you're looking for that approval and to get that okay, and you continue to do it every time you're triggered and you feel threatened. Not only that, but continuing to do this behavior, it can gaslight you into believing that you are always guilty. And this is because you're acting on that behavior of overly explaining yourself. When you do something wrong, it's very common in human nature to overly share detail because you want the person to believe you, because you don't fully believe yourself. And that's what happens, is because you were gaslighted into believing that you're in the wrong or you were doubted, you then believe you're always wrong And so then you're acting off of this guilt of, oh, I'm wrong, I need them to give me the okay. So you are always trying to prove yourself, which makes you unintentionally appear to be guilty. And then subconsciously you believe you're always guilty and you're in the wrong. And that's why you may have these questions like, was this wrong of me, or am I in the wrong, or am I not allowed to do this? You will gaslight yourself so much because you subconsciously always believe that you're guilty when you're not actually guilty, you're not doing something wrong. But you've been programmed and made to believe that you are wrong, but you're not. So I'm sure some people will have the question of, how do I know if I'm overly explaining yourself? What's the appropriate amount of, explaining yourself? And we'll talk more in depth about that, but let's first understand, how do you know you're overly explaining yourself? So the cycle starts where something happens. You may need to say no to something. Maybe you share something and you're being doubted, or you get blamed for something. And then it comes a thought. Oh no, they're going to be mad, or they're getting mad, or they won't believe me, or there's going to be some sort of consequence from this. So this is the immediate thought. There's also subconscious beliefs, which we'll go into in a minute, but this is the first immediate thought. Then a sensation comes. You may feel tension in your neck. You may feel maybe your heart fluttering a little bit. You may feel sick to your stomach. You will feel a sensation in your body that lets you know, uh-oh, I'm having some sort of anxiety. So usually the sensation is anxiety. Then you will notice you start to get an urge, and you will start to overly explain yourself and add detail. You may trip over your words. You may start talking really fast and jumbling. And so you'll be adding more and more detail, and you'll be sharing things that are completely unnecessary. Like, you'll start to talk about how you ate eggs in the morning and it made your tummy hurt, and it had nothing to do with whether you can go to an event or not. So you have to understand, this urge to overly explain yourself is a very subconscious urge. You consciously are aware you are saying these things. Like, you're sharing all these things, and after you do it, you're like, why did I do that? I don't understand. Like, why can't I just keep it simple? Why did I do that? You don't understand the trauma that lies underneath. It is all very much so, like I said, subconscious, and your subconscious always takes over your conscious mind. So you may try to stop, and then you can't because you don't understand the trauma, and you were not getting to the root of what's going on. You're just trying to prevent something, but you don't know how to 100% stop yourself because there's subconscious beliefs that are ingrained, that have neural pathways that are formed, and you work off these neural pathways, and your brain is programmed a certain way, and so you haven't been able to tackle those beliefs, and that's why you can't stop. So when it comes to subconscious belief and trauma in general, we just have to quickly go over and understand trauma, because people don't fully understand trauma. They think huge events have to happen, like getting in car accidents or death, or like something severe has to happen to cause you to be traumatized, but no. Trauma is something that's personal to each individual. So trauma is a lasting emotional response to an emotional event. So two people can go through similar things, and one will leave being completely fine, and the other one can be traumatized by it. For instance, seeing spiders. Maybe a spider crawls on two people. One will be traumatized, the other won't. What makes the difference of why one is traumatized and the other one isn't is what the mind's meaning it puts behind the trauma, and the fact that they didn't resolve it. And now that situation is stuck in the nervous system. So that's why it's so important to get to the root, get to that subconscious programming, get to the meaning that your mind has put behind it, and resolve it and work through it, and to reprogram your subconscious programming. And then once you understand this trauma, you get to the root, then you can really heal. And then you can start to do that other work of being able to stop overly explaining yourself. So how do you stop? So first is to get to the root of that subconscious programming, those thoughts. You get to that urge of feeling the need to overly explain yourself. So you may have thoughts and beliefs like, if I do this, they're going to get mad, or they're going to leave, or they're not going to believe me, or they're going to hurt me, or I can't trust myself, I can't believe myself. You believe that you are responsible for other people's happiness, or your worth depends on how other people are feeling in their happiness. All these beliefs, you're worthless, you're disgusting, all these terrible beliefs cause you to feel the need to explain yourself and to feel validated, understood, and heard, because you don't feel good on your own, and you feel the need to take care of other people and make them believe you and approve of you. You don't believe yourself, and you place a lot of your worth on other people and their opinions of you. So all these beliefs and these thoughts when something happens, it triggers you to feel that anxiety. So there's a certain event or something happens, like I said, you have needing to say no, or someone doubting you, or whatever it is, that triggers your anxiety to come up, and then you will start to overly explain yourself. So once you are aware of these thoughts and these beliefs, then you can recognize, oh, this is me about to overly explain yourself, and it's easier for you to stop doing it. And this type of work you have to do not even when you're just explaining yourself, but even behind the scenes of working on your belief system. Remember, you're not responsible for other people's happiness. Working on you believing yourself. All of those things are really important. So what something we always talk about is, it's not just a matter of ridding something, it's a matter of replacing. You have to replace these beliefs and this subconscious programming. You can't just rid. So that's the first part, is being able to recognize and also be aware of the sensations. We always talk about recognizing those sensations. So in that moment, so that's behind the scenes, but in the moment when you're getting that urge to overly explain yourself, be aware of the sensations, where it is. Do you feel tension? Do you feel sick? What do you feel? Because then you can be like, that's my signal that I feel the need to overly explain myself. And then you can talk yourself through it. And how you talk yourself through it is, it's so important that you give yourself permission to be able to say no. It's important you validate yourself and your reality. You have to accept that people are not always going to agree with you or understand you or validate you. And that is okay. You don't need other people to always validate you or accept your point of view, especially if they're people you don't fully trust or they're gaslighters. You definitely don't want to believe their point of view or take it into consideration. You only take into consideration people that you fully trust and they have your best interest. And generally those people, they don't make you feel the need to overly explain yourself. They accept what you have to say and they generally believe you. So accept that people are not always going to accept what you're doing. People are always going to judge you and have judgments. That's okay. You need to believe yourself and stop acting guilty, because you're not guilty. You can say no to things and it's okay. You can not want to do something and that's okay. You can have a different perspective and that's okay. You need to give yourself that permission. Hey, this is okay for me to have these feelings or view things in a different way or say no. And I accept my reality. I know that these things happen. Maybe they don't believe it, but it's okay because I know what happened and I firmly believe myself. You have to validate and believe yourself, because if you don't believe yourself, who's going to believe you? You're not, off the rails crazy. You are a sane human and you need to start believing and acting that way. So those are two key, very important components. The other thing is, you may be like, okay, well, how do I know I'm overly explaining myself? What are maybe some outside signs? How, like maybe the way someone's reacting. So definitely you can pay attention to someone's reaction when you notice you're about to overly explain yourself. So some things they may do is, it may seem like they're checked out. Maybe it seems like they keep trying to interrupt you. Maybe it's their body language is their foot's kind of by the door and they seem disinterested. That's how you know that you're sharing too much detail and it's not necessary. You really just need to keep it short, simple, and sweet. No, I'm sorry, I can't attend that tonight. I have other things going on. Something simple like that. You get to decide how much you want to share with someone. Not everyone is worthy of knowing everything. And you also may have struggled, another point is you may have struggled with guilt, where your narcissistic parent or abusive parent, whatever it is, your abusive partner, they force you to feel guilty that if you didn't explain yourself that you were doing something wrong. That does not mean you're doing something wrong. That is a boundary issue on their end. You never have to overly explain yourself. You never have to explain yourself to anyone. You can just say no because you want to say no. Or you can have a certain perspective just because you have a certain perspective. You don't always have to go into detail about it. That does not mean you're sneaky or you're bad or you're wrong for not sharing too much detail. So yes, going back to seeing the way people react, just know, okay, you know what, maybe I didn't initially notice, but I noticed maybe their body language. You don't want to do it to an anxiety state. You want to just do it of like, oh, okay, I noticed maybe I didn't catch myself and now I can just reel it back. And this is something you want to continuously practice. Like I said, it's important to work on your beliefs outside of your interactions with others, but also work on them in your interactions, making sure before you say no to something or before you share something, validating yourself and then sharing it, and then making sure that you don't overly explain yourself. There's a certain degree where you explain yourself, but you don't, be aware when you're sharing too much detail. And be aware when you're getting that urge of like, oh my God, they don't believe me and I have to overly say it so they believe me. No, it's important that you know the less information you share, the more confident you will appear, because you are not appearing to be guilty or like you don't believe in yourself. So what do you guys think? Leave it all in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with someone that you think may need it. And until next time, thanks for watching. Bye guys. My lights are not staying put. Watch them in the middle of the video. The light just falls and then I just go, oh, whatever. Is that a shadow or is this hair just out of whack? Whatever. What's the word I'm looking for? Not jumbling. So if you get to the end of this video, I have a question. What do you guys think? Do you think I should retire the wave, or do you like the wave? Is that like my trademark, or should it like wax off? Let me know what you think in the comments below. It's so important